Hey guys, the purpose of this video is for me to discuss your vocab with you guys and the expectations for this assignment, which I'm sure you guys already are very familiar with, but the objective today, or the learning intention today, is to identify key terms associated with the age of new imperialism, so that you guys can incorporate these words in your future analysis, writing, and speech. This is the schedule that we have for this unit. I'm going to go over this when I get back to school, but basically you're working independently from now until Wednesday. And then when I come back, you guys have a vocab quiz, so make sure that you get this vocab done on time. And then also I will be giving you a quiz on the reading that you guys have tomorrow that you have to complete individually as well. The following week, you guys have finals, and then we wrap up this unit. It's a very short but exciting unit, and we're still in the modern era from 1750 to 1900, so we're still talking about that age of revolutions and the industrial period. And actually, that's what one of the reasons for our title for this unit is Consequences of Industrialization. So what happens as a result of Europe industrializing? And it's, well, no surprise, it's the new age of imperialism, right? So we have imperialism running rampant in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. We're all over the map, but like I said, mostly we're going to be concentrating in Asia and Africa this unit. And our first word is imperialism. This is a policy of extending a country's power and influence through diplomacy or military force. Another way that you guys can think of imperialism is like a kind of a form of colonization. Our next word is nationalism, and some of you guys might be familiar with this word because it was mentioned in our previous readings for Unit 5. But this word means a pride in and devotion to one's country. Basically think of like those people who are really proud of their country, like patriots. So nationalism has like forms, like variations of it. We also have extreme nationalism, which could be very controversial, and we'll talk more about that as we get into World War II and also into more about the wars, World War I, World War II. Our next word is ideology, and this is pretty simple. It's what you believe in. So basically, it's the beliefs that you have. For example, if you are Republican, one of your beliefs is to be a little bit more conservative, small government. If you're a Democrat, your beliefs are more like geared towards the working class, social services, and things of that sort. If you're a communist, your belief is everybody should get an equal piece of the pie. If you're a capitalist, it's like pull yourself up by your bootstraps. So those are forms of ideology. And actually, one ideology that's very prominent during this time period is called social Darwinism. This is something we've talked about in this class before. Maybe you're familiar with it because of Catholic studies, but social Darwinism is a discredited theory that individuals are subject to the laws of nature, of natural selection, and basically what it argues is that like survival of the fittest, like if a country is able to take over another country, it's because they're better, right? This is a discredited idea, so this is not something that's very popular nowadays in modern times, but back then it was used to justify racism, colonization, imperialism, things of that sort. One example of social Darwinism, sometimes you hear social Darwinism or sometimes you hear it called eugenics. That's spelled EUGENICS, eugenics. So that's another form of social Darwinism. Then we also have spheres of influence, and spheres of influence refers to countries having political and economic control, but do not directly govern another country. So for example, Mexico and the United States has a sphere of influence in Mexico, meaning that it gets to kind of decide a lot of Mexico's economic policies and political policies, but it's not part of the United States. It's not a colony of the United States. You just have a lot of influence of the United States in Mexico because we're next door neighbors and because the United States is so rich and powerful, right? So that's one example of spheres of influence. You're going to see an example of spheres of influence in your reading, referring to China and how different countries are trying to carve out spheres of influence within China within a weakened Ming dynasty. So you're going to have Japan there, France. You're going to have as well the Germans and the English there as well. And that you also have something called the Berlin Conference. It's kind of like spheres of influence, but more direct colonization, where you have Europeans agreeing on the rules of conquest for Africa. How are they going to colonize Africa? Where they literally sit at a table and they look at a map and they say, okay, Spain, you can have this part. Britain, you can have this part. France, you can have this part, right? So it's sometimes referred to also as the scramble for Africa, whereas you can picture like a bunch of European countries just like scrambling to get as much of Africa as they can. It's actually a really messed up thing that they did because they didn't actually consult any African leaders about what they wanted. So this is kind of the same image, kind of mirroring what's happening in China is also happening in Africa as well. And then you have the Meiji Restoration. This is a political event that restored the practical imperial rule to Japan and also industrialized Japan. It's a very important moment in Japanese history, and I would also argue world history, because Japan began to see, there's a reason why they're in this picture. They began to see what was happening in other Asian countries and said, we will not be colonized, so we also need to be industrialized as well. So, for example, I will write down that this is Japan's industrialization. And it's not just in Asia and Africa that this is happening. It's kind of also happening in Latin America, but it's happening differently because America developed something called the Monroe Doctrine, which basically says that they oppose any interference from Europe in the Western Hemisphere. So they're saying, hey, Europe, keep your hands off of Latin America, which is a nice neighborly thing to do, except they do it because they're the ones that want to, kind of take over a lot of Latin America and Latin American regions. And we'll be talking more about that as the year goes on. And then there's the word Westernization, and Westernization is the adoption of Western ideas, technology, and culture. So kind of think about when you go home for the holidays or for summer break, you go to Mexico, El Salvador, or wherever you're from, and you find a McDonald's there. Or the other day I went to, not the other day, but over the summer I went to Monterrey and I found a Church's Chicken. Right, so, and then also a KFC, right, so, and I found a Walmart there too, so that's an example of Westernization. And then there's economic dependence. This is a relationship which less developed nations have their trade controlled by developed nations. So what ends up happening because of industrialization is that a lot of nations like Mexico, India, become dependent on the machinery of the developed world. So then they're just stuck exporting raw materials like cotton to the States or to Britain, and they themselves never become developed, or it's harder for them to become developed. So that's a form of economic dependence that still exists today. And then there's the word apartheid. This is the social policy of racial segregation and legal discrimination in South Africa against non-whites. this happened mostly in Africa. It's like segregation, like Jim Crow, but in South Africa. And then there's the word resistance, and this is the act of actively opposing or keep from surrendering. So within everything that we're learning this unit, I want you guys to remember that people actively resisted against colonization as well, and hopefully we get to see some examples of that during our class. Don't forget to add your images and your sentences and your examples to this, and also complete your work to Canvas, upload your work onto Canvas so that you can get full credit and that you have a quiz when I get back. Good luck. Happy New Year.